Hey guys, it's me, Emil, and today we're going to be talking about the Muppet Show pilots. Now, in early 2024 / before I was Emil, I did discuss the 2 Muppet Show pilots. But I've been doing some thinking, and I think it's time that I revisit both of them in one video. You know, considering one of them is in the Poo Dog 3 archives, and the other one is just kind of, I don't know, I seem really out of it in those videos. I seem like I do not want to be there. So I figured in a week where I have like nothing to do, how about I revisit the Muppet Show pilots? Now, Jim Henson's The Muppet Show first premiered in September of 1976. And of course, the actual Muppet Show had 2 pilot episodes, one featuring Juliet Prowse and the other one featuring Connie Stevens. However, in the 2 years prior, there were 2 ABC specials that could work as a proof of concept to see what they could actually do with a Muppet-themed variety show. Kind of testing the waters, if you will. Both of these specials aren't really like talked about. They're not even on any like streaming services. You gotta go on the websites in order to watch these things. I was able to find the Muppet Valentine's Day show on YouTube, and I had to go to the Internet Archive for the Muppet Show Sex and Violence. And those specials are going to be the things that we're going to be discussing today. The first one being the Muppets Valentine Show. This one premiered January 30th, 1974. And it's a half-hour special all about love. The overarching story of this special is that the host, Wally, has writer's block and he's trying to write a Muppets Valentine special. But the only issue is that the writer's block is causing him to kind of forget what is love. Baby, don't hurt me. No more. Now, anyone who knows anything about the Muppets is probably wondering, why isn't Kermit the host of the Valentine's special? And the reason behind this is very simple, actually. Around this point in time, Kermit was primarily a Sesame Street character, and critics were starting to say that he was getting overused in a lot of Jim's projects. I mean, in projects like The Frog Prince and Hey Cinderella, he was the host. And for some reason, people were starting to get tired of Kermit the Frog. So knowing that, Jim Henson decided that he was going to run with a new host that would have the possibility of appealing more to the adult audience, because both of these pilots were supposed to prove that the Muppets could be used to not just entertain children, but to entertain adults and families alike. Wally was the first test run of host, and this was his debut and final appearance. Kermit was in the special, but he kind of just showed up in the background, which in hindsight, it kind of makes it a little weirder that he isn't hosting because he's in the special anyways. Jim Henson was technically still kind of overusing Kermit the Frog. I don't know, whatever. But anyways, out of the 2 pilots that we're going to talk about today, this one was formatted the most like an actual episode of what would become the Muppet Show, even down to the fact that it had a celebrity guest. The celebrity guest star in this one was Mia Farrow, and I think the decision to having one human inside of this entire sketch was very smart. The show starts with Wally, George the janitor, Mildred, and Brewster talking about love. George says he doesn't know anything about love, and he doesn't love anything. This segues into the Muppets singing "Love is a Simple Thing." Once we come back from commercial, they're still talking about love, and then Kermit chimes in to talk about his doomed love affair with Mrs. Mousy. This transitions into a sketch where they sing "Froggy Went A-Courtin'." The whole show is set inside of this little living room, and every single time there's a new sketch, it kind of starts by a character talking about, like, we're gonna go into the sketch right now. And then other times, Wally has this, like, magic typewriter that can, like, spawn people in. Wally writes on his typewriter that Mia Farrow shows up, and she does and meets the Muppets. Mia receives a Valentine's Day card from Thog, and then she goes into, like, a Thog dream reality where they perform a duet by the name Real Live Girl. Then we come back to the living room, and Mia talks about wanting to own a dog. Rufus is high-key suggesting it should be him. Mia kind of agrees, and then she goes into singing a song to him called "Believe Me If All Those Endearing Young Charms." Wally starts talking about how beautiful love is and how there's so many different kinds of love, and then he starts talking about how there's love all over the earth and even on other planets. This is when we cut to Kermit reporting from the planet Coosbane, where aliens are about to perform the Galileo Hoop Hoop, which is like the Coosbanian mating dance. Fun fact, this sketch eventually gets reused for the actual Muppet Show. After the Galileo Hoop Hoop and they have all their little Elmo babies, we cut back to the living room, and we finally get a payoff from a line that George said at the beginning of the special. Here we find out that George loves his mop, and everybody starts singing a song called "We Got Love," because everybody's got love. There's love all around, and everybody loves something. And I think the biggest takeaway in style from this sketch is that this entire episode had a through line. It was all about love and all the different ways that people can love each other. We get to see all kinds of love in this. We get to see love on other planets. We get to see human and Thog relationships. We get to see mouse and frog relationships. We get to see love from a man and a mop. Wow, I'm sounding like Dr. Seuss right now, dude. I can't stop. However, the next pilot's format is a little different than this one. The next one premiered on March 19th, 1975 and was called The Muppet Show Sex and Violence. This half-hour variety special was supposed to parody all of the constant use of sex and violence on television and try to be a new form of adult media. This time around, the plot is a little more crazy. The temporary host for this one was Nigel the conductor, and him, Sam Eagle, and Floyd from the Electric Mayhem are working together to put on a pageant for the 7 deadly sins, with new original Muppet characters playing the roles of the sins. Instead of having a celebrity guest, there's envy, anger, gluttony, vanity, lust, avarice, and sloth. And then there's an 8th one that they think about having.
Wearing funny pants to a funeral.
Well, let's see, we got envy, rage, gluttony, sloth, vanity, lust, avarice, and
Wearing funny pants to a funeral.
I don't think so,
No,
Sam, no.
And although in theming, this one is kind of more similar to an actual episode of The Muppet Show, looking at it as an actual episode of a TV show, you can realize this is nothing like The Muppet Show. There's like 11 plots in this one, and they all alternate between each other constantly, like a compilation. Of course, the main sketch is the behind-the-scenes conference room with Nigel, Sam, and Floyd Pepper, where they play different games and talk as the 7 deadly sins start to slowly arrive. There's another sketch that happens on Mount Rushmore where all the presidents exchange jokes. There's the At the Dance segment where 2 characters are waltzing around a dance floor, and then once they get close to the camera, they would say a joke. This sketch is reused in the actual Muppet Show. There's a wrestling match. The Swedish chef demonstrates how to make a submarine sandwich. The Electric Mayhem sings Love You to Death. Statler and Waldorf do not sit on a balcony and heckle the audience. They sit in their den and just kind of talk to each other. They're an actual part of the show in this special. There's a segment called Films in Focus, where a reviewer talks about the film Return to Beneath the Planet of the Pigs. I'm almost positive that this one inspired Pigs in Space. And then there's 3 segments where Jim Henson was kind of just showing off his creative prowess. The first one called Aggression, which features a argument between 2 heaps, some like tarantula looking monsters, and 2 stalks, 2 like fuzzy hook nose looking guys, and they're speaking gibberish the whole time, but you can understand it because there's a lot of like, you know, visual storytelling, for lack of a better term. There's the Theater of Things, which is the pencils getting a new ruler, you know, get it? And then there's my favorite segment of the entire special called Birds in the Trees, where the birds are sitting on a black background and kind of fly around from tree to tree, flirting with another group of birds. And similar to the heaps and stalks, they're not necessarily speaking in real sentences. They're not speaking gibberish, but each bird is repeating like the same exact phrase over and over and over.
For crying out loud. For crying out loud. For crying out loud.
I think this is a very creative sketch that shows that saying one phrase with different emphases can mean totally different things. If you don't watch a single one of these sketches, this was the one I highly recommend. This special is a lot more random than the last one. I mean, I guess there's kind of a through line with like the thematic emphasis on sex and violence, but you can kind of only go so far with that. I mean, yeah, of course, you've got the 7 deadly sins. You've got Aggression that does show a lot of violence. Return to Beneath the Planet of the Pigs has violence in a movie. Birds in the Trees segment, I guess, could be seen as kind of like lustful. But then there's ones like the Mount Rushmore segment, and what am I supposed to say about that? There's definitely a lot of differences between these 2 specials, and a lot of differences of what would become the actual Muppet Show. Here's some fun things I noticed while watching these that would eventually change later on in the Muppet lore. In the Muppets Valentine Show, Crazy Harry, the explosion guy, was referred to as Crazy Donald. However, in the next special, he would eventually get changed to Crazy Harry. I guess it's because he has hair. I don't know. What do you call me? Harry Meal? Of course, there's the big one that I've already discussed where Kermit isn't the host, but he's kind of in the background in a lot of these sketches. Animal's kind of like in a sewer. For this one, they kind of like keep him captive. Obviously, like I said, Statler and Waldorf are actually a part of the show, which is pretty interesting. And there's an early version of Miss Piggy referred to, I think, by Piggy Lee. So does that mean Miss Piggy's whole name is Miss Piggy Lee? I don't know. But then again, there's a lot of things that didn't change after these specials. And whenever they made the Muppet Show, they kind of just pulled things out and placed it into the Muppet Show. Characters like Sam Eagle was exactly the same. He's never changed once. Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem are exactly the same as well. And then there's characters like George the Janitor and the Swedish Chef that basically play the exact same roles in the specials as that they would in the actual Muppet Show. Both of these pilots have a lot of things good about them and a lot of things that they needed to work on. I think their strengths and weaknesses complement each other. The Valentine's Day one has singing and guest stars, whereas the Muppet Show Sex and Violence has a lot more of that variety show feel and Muppet randomness and humor. However, it didn't have the singing, the interaction between humans and Muppets, and characters that the audience could really latch on to because they weren't really learning a lot about them. We were kind of just just jumping from place to place. And I think because they combined all of the strengths from both of these pilots, the Muppet Show was as good as it was. They each have telltale things that would make the Muppets the Muppets. And I think it's pretty interesting to look back on these pieces of media. But yeah, I think that's about it for this week's video. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this more in-depth look at both of these Muppet Show pilots. I think you should check them out. They're really funny and really good if you like the Muppets. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. I'll see you next week. Bye.